Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As we welcome you once again to the second half of this evening's broadcast on In Conversation with myself, Inayat Wadi. And as we continue taking a look at what has been playing out in Palestine, but also globally. And this morning, I think many of us, I'm not too sure whether we were shocked, whether we were surprised, whether we were just amused by what we actually had heard. And this was after the meeting with Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, Donald Trump talked about owning Gaza, about long-term ownership, about cleaning out the Palestinians. Now, we know for a while he has been making these noises and also insisting that clearing Gaza for Egypt and Jordan to take in close on to 2 million people. Now, many are saying that this is catastrophic. And again, we've seen rejection come through from the Arab world as well. The Palestinian ambassador to the United Nations issued a statement this morning as well. And all of this has been playing out while my guest, Mohammed Noor, and I were talking about the build-up to this broadcast. And I'm sure this has caught him by a surprise as well, because we are going to be talking about the Gaza ceasefire, but more importantly, taking a look at the Middle East region, taking a look at the political dynamics that are playing out, and more importantly, what could some of these consequences be. So without much ado, my old colleague from the old days at CII, and we spent a lot of time together as well, and I must say, expert in terms of his analysis and reading of the Middle East political dynamics. Mohammed Noor, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And it's always good to be with you. Jazakallah khair for always coming on, calling on me now and then. And I know there are many, many experts out there who are much better than me. But Jazakallah khair for affording me the opportunity and to share some of my thoughts, and I hope they are of value.
Well, Mohammed Noor, you and I had a discussion during the weekend. I know you sent me a voice note as well. And we were talking about the amazing scenes with the temporary ceasefire, or if one wants to call it a pause in Gaza. But those images have actually been breathtaking. And from the hostage release to the mass migration of people from the south to the north of Gaza, it's something that we haven't seen, and it has been history in the making. But added to that, you spoke about the wider region, the Middle East region, the politics, the dynamics that are playing out, and how this is actually likely to impact on the rest of the region. And yeah, this morning we woke up, Benjamin Netanyahu, Donald Trump had a meeting.
Yeah, that's you covered so much. When the 7th of October happened, I think this is probably the first time that I've responded to anyone asking me to participate in a discussion or something, because it was very clear that the aftermath, and at the onset I'm having this interview, and without, for the lack of a better word, trying to look at it from a very, very non-emotional, non-biased way, and almost to strip it of all merit, if that makes sense. Just look at the facts and what has happened, and let's try to analyze it, irrespective of whether you support Israel, whether you support Hamas, whether you support whoever. Let's just look at it as facts. You can interpret certain events, but there are certain hardcore, solid facts on the ground, and let us look at that. If that makes sense. So,
Yes.
When the 7th of October happened, for me it was very strange, because usually on the 7th of October I usually get messages from some Egyptian friends, because the October War, and the messages I got that morning, like, what really is happening here? And my first thought was, you cannot comment on this, meaning no one can really give a comment on this, because the ramifications of this are going to be broad and vast and long term. And the reason for that assumption is that every conflict that the Arabs have been in with Israel, you could see within the first 2 days that the Israelis were going to escalate this conflict, and they were going to retaliate in the way. I'm not surprised by the way they retaliated. That was written The writing was on the wall. Again, for other historic facts that happened in the year and a half before that inside Israel. And so the question was just, what was this going to look like? And every huge military confrontation in the Middle East since 1948 has had one outcome. The one outcome is there's always been a loss of territory for the Palestinians. Again, I'm not discussing the merits. Who was right, who was wrong, who should have gone, who should have not have gone, who was a sellout, that is not the issue. The issue is every conflict, 48, 67, the 70s, there was a loss for the Palestinians, right? So every big movement, there's a loss. This is excluding the other loss of territory. And when I mean a loss, I don't mean in propaganda, I don't mean in international international championship of the cause or not. I'm saying on the ground, you had so many square kilometers. In 48, you had so many you lost. In 67, you lost. 70s, you lost. And in between that, how much did you lose? So this is just another escalation in Israel claiming territory and Israel expansion. The interesting thing here is that Israel also then managed to expand in terms of the influence in the region, political influence, managing their security better in terms of eliminating, exterminating threats. So it was very clear on the 7th of October that there's definitely going to be a loss of territory based on the history and reading of the history. And the issue was just to see how big the Palestinian loss of territory will be. And if you look what's happening at the moment, I mean, as we speak now, everyone's looking at Gaza. The Israelis have been incurring into the West Bank. And there is the plan is that it is quite clear it's happening. There will be land grabs in the West Bank. The Israelis claimed land in Syria, right? And there will be interventions in Gaza. So irrespective of how you look at it, from a pure factual perspective, what's happening on the ground, the Palestinians are again in the circle is turning, and they're back at the point where there is a loss of territory. And I think that's a very important fact for us to be aware of and to establish and understand, the urgency of reaching a stage where we can establish the two-state solution. And many people will say this two-state solution is out. But if you say it's out, you have to come with an alternative to that.
Well, Mohammed Noor, in fact, I want to come to this two-state solution shortly. But just staying with what you are saying and talking about the territory and the territorial gains that Israel has been making throughout the decades that we've been talking about, and you mentioned Syria as well, and here again was another clear example, the annexation of the West Bank that we know is on the cards as well. And it's interesting that when this so-called ceasefire deal was negotiated and it was signed, okay, we had two American presidents, one who was the existing president and the other one was the incumbent in both Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And the question that was asked at that point in time is, what is the agenda? What is the hidden agenda behind this ceasefire deal? Because Netanyahu wouldn't have just accepted this deal if he knew if there were no guarantees, and we know what is happening within Israel as well with the far right and the coalition government. The key issue here is Donald Trump made a statement the other day where he compared a pen on his desk to the territory that Israel actually occupies. He says this is what Israel occupies in the greater Middle East. Now that statement alone speaks volumes, Mohammed Noor.
The issue of I mean, this is a common oversimplification of the problem, which says, Israel only occupies so much of the land and so forth. This is an and there are many oversimplifications And these oversimplifications, they're extremely cheap, they're extremely stupid, they're retarded, and they are non-factual. And I'm actually I get very angry and irritated by it. Not from an emotional level, but from a pure historical factual perspective. And the issue is, it is the West. It is always people in the West who come with this issue and say, well, Israel only occupies a small piece of the Middle East. My issue is, let us go back. The Jewish issue. The Jewish question, it was never a Middle East issue per se. The Jewish issue and anti-Semitism is a European problem. Your children, my children, your children are big. I still have children in school. They all are taught the Merchant of Venice. And there's not a simplification. The Merchant of Venice speaks about Shylock. There's anti-Semitism in there. This anti-Semitic stereotype of Jews being such and such and such. It doesn't come from the Middle East. It comes from English literature. It comes from Europe, right? Post-World War II, right? The Allies and the West, and all of this is documented. This is not thumb-sucking. This is not conspiracy theory. It was the choice of the Europeans and their vision to rid themselves of, quote-unquote, their problem. And, early in the century, it was the Balfour Declaration and so forth. So this issue of people like Trump saying, it's just like a piece of a pen. Yeah, why didn't you put it in your own continent? Additional to this is, this oversimplification and this hogwash, where people say, show me Palestine on the map before 1948. I will show you something better than the map. Really, can I show you something better than the map of Palestine, where Palestine exists? Palestine exists in the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration did not say create a state of Israel in Jordan or Transjordan or in Egypt. It says Palestine. Balfour Declaration refers to Palestine. So I don't listen to this. I don't note this. I don't consider it. It refers to shallow, cheap. I won't even call it thinking. And it really oversimplifies, and it cheapens and it undermines. It undermines the seriousness of the situation, both for Israel and for the Palestinians.
Yes, Mohammed Noor, you talk of the Merchant of Venice. We're talking about the Merchant of Washington here, because we know Donald Trump was in real estate, and he sees Gaza as a piece of real estate, and that's a fact. So here's the two things about Donald Trump: is people underestimate Donald Trump. People always underestimate him, and again, because many critics also fall into the trap of oversimplification, thinking he's an idiot, claiming he's an idiot. And laughing at him, etc. That's oversimplification. Donald Trump, like any president, like any leader, like any politician, like any businessman, and Donald Trump, everyone knows, is a showman. Donald Trump is a showman par excellence. If you look at Donald Trump's history, I don't need to talk about that. He's a showman par excellence. He knows how to talk to a crowd. He knows how to respond to the crowd. But Donald Trump is no idiot. And the first problem we have is when people underestimate him. And so you take comments like this off the pen and you say, this guy's a lunatic. He's not a lunatic. He is the president again. He's doing very interesting reforms in America. And I say interesting again because it's out there. Are these good reforms internally? Are they bad reforms internally? We need to see that. But he's serious. So don't always take anything that he says as being hogwash. The question is, if he says this, let's say, he looks at it as a piece of real estate, and this is what he says is going to do. So that's the 100%. Let's say that is impossible and it's a fairy tale. What does a 50% of that reality look like? What does a 20% of that reality look like? What does a 10% of that reality look like? That is what you should ask yourself. What does that plan look like? Or what does that statement look like in its smallest, most minimal form of implementation and success on their from their perspective? Now you need to start worrying. Well, Mohammed Noor, of course, there are major concerns, but I think let's just go back a bit. Let's take a step back a bit. And I think this is important because this is what we wanted to talk about as well. And we've seen the reaction now from the Arab world. We've seen the outright rejection from both Egypt and Jordan in terms of clearing out the people of Gaza into those countries. We've seen the 6 countries get together, the likes of Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Qatar, all of them. And again, there has been a complete rejection and saying that this is a non-negotiable. There is no compromise as far as Palestine is concerned. And so let's just talk about the broader region. A statement like this that came out this morning, I know it was music to the ears of Benjamin Netanyahu. This guy was smiling like you couldn't believe, because it's exactly what he wanted to hear. And this is not what the Arab nations, this is not what the Palestinians, this is not what Hamas wanted to hear, because they rejected this outright as well.
So again, let us go back to what they said, what Trump has been saying. And I will say, you know what? You want to get Palestinians out of Gaza? Let's go for it. Let's get rid of all Palestinians in Gaza and send them back to where they came from. Let's put that as a clause and say, Palestinians in Gaza, let's put them back to where they came from. They will never accept that, because a large percentage of Palestinians who are in Gaza are actually refugees in Gaza. And they are refugees from 1948. Again, no emotion, fact. You know, a large percentage of occupants of Gaza are refugees from 1948 and from 1967. What is today Israel within the Israeli borders, whatever their borders are, the borders keeps on moving. We need to say, okay, this family, where did they come from? And let's send them back to Israel. Let's send them back to where they were in 1948 and before 1967. Let us do that. You know, so you need to sit back and we shouldn't always allow ourselves to have knee-jerk reactions. The other issue is there are already millions of Palestinians living in Egypt, living in Jordan, and so again, the narrative is, you know, which is the same. It comes. It's in the same package. It's in the same packet as this. It's only a small piece of the Middle East. The other piece, the other item in that package is, you know, why don't you Arabs take them? Okay, let's say for argument's sake, take them. There's already millions in Egypt, millions in Jordan, millions in Saudi Arabia, hundreds of thousands in the Arab countries. So again, it's part of the showmanship. It's part of the showmanship to throw out and spew these oversimplifications. Everyone responds in a very serious fashion, you know. And it's important to remember that the issue of the return of refugees and the return of the Palestinians, the right of return, when Oslo was agreed and all negotiations post that, the issue of Jerusalem as the capital and the issue of the return of Palestinians are the two issues that the Palestinian Authority, the PLO, and everyone who's under them have never, ever retracted. And those are the two non-negotiables. I mean, that the issue of saying that we're going to kick more people out, you must take them. You are going to the one golden or one of two golden non-negotiables in all Palestinian negotiations. And this has also been the consistent position of all Arab states, especially, of course, the states that are surrounding Gaza and Israel and so forth, and the broader Arab world. So the question again comes, you know, this is the show. What does the real implementation look like?
Yes, but Mohammed Noor, again, you know, I just want to come back to the ceasefire. And when the ceasefire had taken place the very next day, we've seen these breathtaking images of Palestinians out in the streets, in the mountains of rubble in Gaza. We've seen, as I mentioned, this mass migration, this exodus of people from the south to the north. And during this time, we've seen 3 occasions or 4 occasions where the captives were released as well. And these were breathtaking in its own, in both the way the Palestinians, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, the Qassam brigades, the Al-Quds brigades conducted themselves, the show of strength, the strategic locations that they used to release these captives as well, which obviously sent a very, very powerful message to not only to Benjamin Netanyahu and to Israel, that we are still in a position of strength. We have not been defeated. And could this be one of the reasons as to why, they're talking now about the removal or clearing Gaza of all Palestinians and relocating them to some of the other Arab countries, Mohammed Noor? I think we've lost Mohammed Noor. What we're going to do is let us just go for a quick air break. We'll be back.
Listen to something fresh. Listen to Salam Media, your humanitarian broadcaster.
Searching for elite local and international investment and advisory services from an award-winning firm? Look no further than the Belmont Mayer Group, your gateway to unparalleled investment and wealth management. At Belmont Mayer, we believe in the art of wealth creation, a meticulous process fueled by our unwavering commitment to excellence. With a focus on providing elite alternative investments and quality advice, we also pride ourselves on maximizing value for our esteemed investors, as seen through our consistent outperformance. Your financial success is our top priority. Join us at Belmont Mayer and experience the difference firsthand. Ready to embark on a journey of greatness? Contact us today. Reach out to the Belmont Mayer Group on 078 786 1698. Call or WhatsApp or email us at info@belmontmayer.com. Elevate your financial future with Belmont Mayer, where every detail matters.
Send food and send kindness to those who have lost their homes and have been plunged into poverty. For those who are a meal away from starvation, a food parcel means an entire family can eat this Ramadan. That's the power of food. Donate now to Islamic Relief.
You know, it's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil, triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying, or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
When the perfect blend of stylish decor, exquisite halal cuisine, and warm hospitality come together, it could only mean Al Bayt Lodge, your true home away from home. Al Bayt is the ideal heaven for families, business people, and tourists with its 4-star family rooms and other luxurious facilities. Conveniently situated close to Port Elizabeth Airport, the beach, and other amenities, your stay will be truly unforgettable, as you'll be taking home lasting memories of the warm hospitality, the serenity and tranquility that Al Bayt has to offer. For reservations, call 041 583 6415 or visit www.albaytlodge.co.za.
Valley's Motor Spares. We supply motor spares and accessories for all makes and models of motor cars, LDVs, bakkies, trucks, and earth-moving equipment. We deliver on time, every time. Please contact us via WhatsApp on 014-592-0925 or call 014-592-0925 or visit 28 Zenderling Street, Rustenburg. Remember the name, Valley's Motor Spares.
Help us build Masjid Hamza in Port Elizabeth. The Prophet ﷺ said, whoever builds a mosque for Allah, Allah will build for him a house like it in paradise. Join us in creating a lasting legacy with Masjid Hamza, our current venue where Salah, Hifz, Maktab and vibrant youth programs take place has outgrown its space and is a rental venue. Alhamdulillah, we've secured a new property right behind us. The plans are drawn and the municipality has approved them. Now we need your help to build. Be part of the Siddiqa Ajaria, continuous charity that brings blessings in this life and the year after. Every donation brings us closer to our goal and earns you immense rewards from Allah. Donate generously today. Account name Al-Fida Foundation, Standard Bank, account number 036893382, branch code 051001, reference Masjida Hamza. For more information, contact us at alfida@telcomsa.net.
Breaking stereotypes, moving boundaries, joining hands. Salam Media. Humanity sets the agenda.
As well, which obviously the world has actually seen when it came to the captive release as well, that the Palestinians cannot be defeated. It's going to prove very, very difficult to even defeat them. And after close on to 15 months of non-stop, relentless bombing, reducing Gaza to mountains and mountains of rubble, and after so many deaths, injuries, all of that actually put together, obviously sent a very, very strong message that the Palestinians have not been defeated. And could this be one of the reasons that if you can't defeat them, get rid of them?
I believe it's much more complex than that. You have to again look at it on the ground. So from Israeli perspective, they are managing to get their hostages back. They have managed to secure greater security in Syria. They have managed to eliminate the senior leadership of Hezbollah and weaken Hezbollah. They've also managed to weaken Hamas to an extent. So from an Israeli perspective, they have achieved quite a few of their goals. And so, of course, within the bigger plan of the strategic plan, there is a calculation of what have we achieved now, where are we now? That's one. From the Hamas and Palestinian perspective, we should remember that Hamas is a resistance movement. Hamas is a grassroots movement. And the Palestinian resistance has always been a grassroots movement. It's interesting, that today the face of the resistance, or the popular face of resistance, is Hamas, because there is resistance taking place with Fatah and other factions within the PLO in the West Bank. That has been taking place, is taking place as we're talking now, right? But talking about Hamas, it's interesting that from the 90s into where we are now, the focus and the arch enemy is Hamas, and now this issue gets packaged in the Islamist, terrorist, fanatics, etc. package, right? But if you go into the 70s and the 80s, the days when there were hijackings and plane hijackings and operations in Europe, there was nothing Islamist about that. George Habash and these guys were actually Christians. They were secularists. And the boogeyman in the world at that time was, or rather the power in that day was, West, Cold War, and the East. And that generation of resistance was East looking. And so it's interesting how the resistance is packaged today. So that brings us to in terms of how I see Hamas fitting into how the resistance is packaged. So it's not packaged as here's a legitimate issue, etc., etc. It is Islamists, terrorists, etc., etc. Although Hamas is an Islamist movement, right? But the whole Palestinian issue now gets framed in this is Islamist, and therefore it has to be anti-Semitic, it has to be, etc., etc., etc. So this is very important to understand this in the historical context. At the grassroots level, Hamas is a grassroots movement, and its fighters and its leadership come from the grassroots. And as the Palestinians will tell you, if there's no Hamas tomorrow, for whatever reason, the resistance will continue. And it goes back to what the Arabs and the Arab League and Arab leaders have been telling, and what Anwar al-Sadat and others have told Israel decades ago, is that you cannot solve this issue with Jordan. You cannot solve this issue by threatening Jordan, by threatening Egypt and telling them, you're going to take people back, whether you like it or not, and it's not going to work. You have to deal with the Palestinians who are from the land, and that is the way to resolve it. Without a shadow of a doubt, Hamas has been weakened. Whoever says Hamas is not weakened does not know what they're talking about. Does Hamas has the capacity? Do they have the capacity to continue to resist? Yes. The most important strategic issue here is, can Hamas govern? Can Hamas govern Gaza? And what will governing Gaza, let's say for all intents and purposes, irrespective of what Trump said, let's say everything goes back, Palestinians are coming back, it needs to be rebuilt, we need order, people need to go back to schools, things need to be rebuilt, international aid has to come, etc., etc. Does Hamas have the administrative capacity to administer and manage Gaza? And manage Gaza, not in manage it, in a nefarious way, but can Hamas administratively bring Gaza back, not to what it was before, but at least bring it back to a state where people can have access to services, access to education, whatever that will look like. The next question then is, what is the role of the Palestinian Authority? Where do we go with that? And this is very important because Gaza is not monolithic. The Palestinian resistance is not monolithic. There are other role players, serious long-term role players within the Palestinian camp. So, has Hamas been defeated? No. Is Hamas weakened? Definitely yes. Does Hamas have the capacity to govern Gaza? For all intents and purposes, it seems that there is probably enough, there's critical mass of support within Gaza to allow them to govern. Do they have the administrative capacity? We don't have empirical evidence for this, but it seems, and that is important. And I think there had to have been a conversation to say, what does Gaza look like after the ceasefire? Do we bring, there were proposals at the beginning of the discussion, we're going to bring back, are we going to put an international force in Gaza? And this is what many wanted. Let's get rid of Hamas, is bring an international force, whatever this force might look like, and to manage Gaza and so forth. So at the end of the day, I think it was it's a win for the Palestinians in that there is a Palestinian faction representing Palestinians, Hamas, who are there and are controlling Gaza, and what does it look like in the near future?
Well, interesting that you speak about an international force, because we're already seeing security contractors occupying the crossing between the south and the north, and these are American security contractors, so their presence is already in the Gaza Strip. But the issue that you raised earlier on, and we spoke about the two-state solution. Now, we've seen Benjamin Netanyahu reject the notion of a two-state solution outright. Okay, he's already thrown that out of the window. Within Israel, he's got the far right, the likes of Smotrich and Ben Gvir, wanting him to go and finish the job in Gaza. So I'm not too sure whether we're actually going to get over phase one of this so-called ceasefire deal yet. But again, coming to the governance of the people of Palestine. And I hear what you're saying, Mohammed Noor. We know that for many around the world, for the West, for America, the guys in Europe, and to an extent even some of the Arabs, that their preferred choice in terms of governance would be the Palestinian Authority. But we've seen also the Palestinian Authority lose a lot of legitimacy in the eyes of Palestinians, of ordinary Palestinians, not only in Gaza, but also we've seen what has now happened in West Bank, where they've even cleared out of Jenin and given Israel full access to do what they want to. So we see another mini genocide unfolding in Jenin as well. So again, it comes down to what do the Palestinians really want? But more importantly, what would it be better in the interests of those surrounding Palestine? And let's talk about the Arabs. Let's talk about the Middle East. Let's talk about the Muslim countries in particular. What would they prefer, or what should they be looking at?
Okay, thanks. I think first of all we must be very wary, all of us. And I've had conversations where I was injured by Palestinian activists on both sides, because I attempted to enter into this conversation about who represents the Palestinians. And for some of us, we might have a certain perspective and be critical of, let's say, the Palestinian Authority, Fatah, the PLO, etc. And others might be critical of Hamas, etc. And in some quarters, it might seem that people are losing faith in the Palestinian Authority. But if you actually go into social media, or not media, if you look at the very clear statements from the Palestinian Authority and their engagement with Hamas, etc. So these all remain conversations between the Palestinian factions. And I believe, just like in South Africa, we as South Africans have to attend to how we vote and who we choose to represent us between the ANC, between the DA and GNU, and historically over the last 30 years, and even before that. I don't want to say you're older than me, but you're older than me. So you lived more than I lived in the days of the liberation struggle. And there was more than one force. It was not just the ANC. And they project, and the different factions projected their liberation philosophy different. Azapu, APLA, ANC, PAC, etc., etc. And when the chips fell, the ANC came into power. I think in Palestine, we should be wary of we can be critical, we can give an opinion, but it should be with respecting and understanding that this remains a Palestinian issue as to who represents them. Academically, critically, I think we can criticize, right? Because that's what it's about, And so I'm very wary about that. Number two, again, factually, if you go to the Arab League in the 60s or 70s recognized the PLO as the sole representative for the Palestinian cause. That is in the document until today. You can go down. I'll find the link and I'll send it to you, and then maybe you can share it with your viewership and your listeners, right? So the Palestinian Authority, the Fatah, the PLO, they remain in the eyes of the Arab League, the sole representatives of the Palestinian issue. Remember, they were mandated in the days of Yasser Arafat, before Hamas and they came along. Even our South African government, until very recently, they are historically the ANC and their entrance point and their relationship at an organizational level with the Palestinian cause historically is through Fatah, right? That's a fact. And if you were fortunate enough to have had conversations with late Ambassador Ali Halim, Allah yarhamu, Kor Ibrahim, Minister Spahat, both of them, Allah yarhamu, you would hear this very clearly, and I'm sure there's documentation, a lot of documentation about this. So we need to understand that. The Arab states are in sync with the Palestinians on that there is no solution except a solution that goes through the Palestinians. So whether it is Hamas who are closer to the Qataris, it is Hamas who are closer to the Qataris, and it's a Palestinian voice. If it's the other factions who are closer to other Arab factions, whatever it may be, it has consistently been that it's the Palestinian voices who are recognized and engaging with the Arab neighbors on that. And I believe that for the Arab leaders, there's a threshold. They're actually caught in a very bad position. So the one position is you know, the position, the Arab position to not want to take in Palestinians. And for example, the example of the Egyptian position during this war was very precarious, because the Egyptians were like, we cannot open our borders. And people are saying, well, how can you not want to let in your Palestinian brothers? And on the other side, Arabs hate Palestinians, they don't want to let them out. The Egyptians are like, no, if you let Palestinians out of Gaza, right, they're probably never coming back again. And when you make that statement out of understanding the historical context, that Palestinians who leave and give up land never come back. And the Palestinians and the Arab League and Arab neighbors understand this. And you can almost be guaranteed to say, yes, they are one in that. What do the Arabs want? The Arabs are all pushing for a two-state solution. Now, mind you, although Netanyahu has says there is no two-state solution, and we must be very careful of, again, of the value which we add when we respond to Netanyahu. And yes, his right-wing government is in power now, etc. But remember, before the 7th of October, Netanyahu almost lost power. He was almost not in power. He was holding on, and there were months and months of protest in Israel. So even within Israel, there are, for the lack of a better word, moderate voices. There are voices who still push for a two-state solution. There are voices who are different to the voice of Netanyahu. And so since 1948 till now, we see that regimes change on both sides. The question is, where, how long is this reign of this Netanyahu belligerence? What do you do in the interim of this belligerent reign? I believe that Israel has attained big strategic objectives for themselves. Hamas is in Gaza. They could potentially manage Gaza and administer it, and now it's just an issue of pushing back and understanding what are the real gains that the Israelis and the Americans want down the line.
Yes, but also Mohammed Noor, looking at the Arab world and looking at their relationship with the likes of the United States of America and the whole question surrounding normalization keeps on cropping up. In fact, it cropped up even when the ceasefire deal or ceasefire negotiations were announced, that in all likelihood, even a country like Saudi Arabia may normalize with the United States of America. Now that we see the rhetoric that is being repeated by Trump on owning Gaza and this long-term ownership and the real estate of Gaza that he's talking about, and we've seen this unwavering position now from the Arab world, from the 6 nations I spoke about earlier. There is no compromise on Palestine. This is a non-negotiable. How is this likely to play out in terms of the relationship that the United States enjoys with some of these Arab countries? And let us also remember one thing. Trump spoke about cutting funding to USAID, to UNRWA. He spoke about, we know this whole debacle on the tariffs that's playing out with Mexico and Canada and China. But 2 countries that he singled out in terms of where he's not going to hold back on funding, one was Israel and the other one is Egypt. So on the one hand, we're saying there is no compromise. Again, this relationship, and I'd just like your thought on how you see this relationship between now the Trump government and these Arab nations of the Arab world.
When I grew up as a young child, as a child, my father and others, they were always talking about these things. And there was always the saying, why don't the Arabs give in a bit? Why don't the Arabs move a bit and let's resolve this issue? But if you look at the reality, the Arabs have moved, starting with Anwar al-Sadat. Anwar al-Sadat moved. despite the reputational cost to him, he is in his grave and there are still people cursing him and people supporting him. But Anwar al-Sadat moved, right? In 88, 89, Yasser Arafat, Allah yarhamu, he moved. I remember, I mean, I was a child, but, you know, and of course, reading his history now, you can see. But when Yasser Arafat went to Oslo, it was first Madrid. I think Madrid was in 89 around there. And after Madrid, they went to Oslo, right? Yasser Arafat moved, right? Jordan moved. King Hussein, they moved. They signed peace treaties. Then the Arab League in early 2000s, around there was the Arab Peace Initiative. And this brings us to the issue of normalization. It was the Saudi Peace Initiative, the King Abdullah Peace Initiative, Saudi Peace Initiative, and it's called the Arab Peace Initiative. It was ratified again, I think, in 2017, 2016. You know, they keep on, you know, ratifying it and just, you know, keeping it updated to say that it is still valid. And it says very simple. These are all the Arab countries in the Arab League who are saying in black and white, and that is still their position today, two-state solution to 1967 borders, to know, in lieu of, against that, this normalization with Israel, with all the Arab countries, etc., etc., etc. So the Arabs have moved, and the Arabs are staying to the two-state solution. By the way, this two-state solution, there is a South African position. This two-state solution, that is the Russian position. That is the Chinese position. The thing is, that is, so again, and I use this Netanyahu belligerent regime. It is belligerence because even your partners in the international community, the UN, everyone recognizes a two-state solution. So it is pure belligerence, and the normal. So the question is, will there be normalization with these Arab countries today, the ones in Saudi, etc., etc.? I mean, some stranger things have happened, but there is no evidence on the ground to indicate or to show, even remotely. You know, when the talk of normalization comes, again, where does it come from? There are no Saudis who are saying we are normalizing. If anything, the Saudis go out of their way of saying every night there are statements coming out. When the Americans talk, the Saudis put out a statement to reaffirm there's no normalization, no normalization, no normalization. And I believe that the Saudis and the rest of the Arab world who have not normalized will not normalize. When it comes to Trump withholding funding, I mean, it's easy to say that, but remember, Israel does not exist alone. It does not exist out of the security that is afforded to it by its Arab neighbors, namely Egypt and Jordan. It's important to remember that it goes both ways, right? If Egypt opens its borders and says every Palestinian who is in Egypt go to Gaza and go from there, what are they going to do? If the Jordanians say, well, you don't want to give us money, we're going to cease border control, and whoever and whatever wants to go in from Jordan, they can go. We don't care. You can have a catastrophe. So again, this is high level showmanship that everyone is jumping for. And it's important to remember that Israel cannot go alone in the Middle East. So as you say that Israel is only a pen on my desk, Israel is just a pen on your desk, and Israel cannot go it alone. They cannot go it alone in the Middle East. They cannot go without the security of which has been promised to them and which the Arabs have upheld. They have not been attacked by any state. Yes, things have happened in the last 20, 30, 40 years and so forth, but the state of Egypt, the state of Egypt, the state of Jordan have upheld to the most part, their peace treaties. So America and Israel need Egypt. They need Jordan, whether it is for consumer markets, whether it is for strategic issues, whether it's, I mean, what happened in Syria, right? And why did we have the Syrian war? A big part of the Syrian war was Russian realignment, strategic realignment in the Middle East. We'll imagine they just tell Trump, you know what, thank you very much, take your money. We're going to open up our lands to a few new Russian bases. You also need to watch the Chinese. The Chinese are aggressively, but very quietly. You don't see it on social media, but if you follow, you will see the Chinese are aggressively aggressively, but softly, with a velvet glove. They're also moving in the region. They're moving economically, they're moving politically. At the beginning of the war, the Chinese hosted rounds of discussions. The Chinese have always been involved in this. So the Chinese are moving. So the Americans can say, we're not giving you money. It's fine. Don't give them money. We will just put Russian bases and whatever other anti-Western bases in the region. That is talk. Talk is cheap. It will. I won't say it will never happen, but we need to see what is the realistic implementation and the realistic potential goals and targets that can be achieved when they try to implement the plan. And really, what is the plan? What is the plan?
Well, Mohammed Noor, interesting question. What is the plan? And I know we are almost out of time. But again, how is this all actually going to play out in terms of realignment of the politics in the Middle East region?
So I believe over the last few years, the last decade, we saw the Arab Spring, we saw ISIS, we saw the chaos in the bloodshed in Syria. We also saw Russia's existence in Syria empowered Iran, that then empowered their allies. The Saudis very clearly have gone out and reached out to the Iranians, and it's very clear that there's a type of relationship, a positive relationship in looking at how they manage the region, right? So we can see it. We can see first of all that the Iranian, Syrian, this type of violence, that those tensions are gone. It is also possible that with the Saudi Iranian approachment, that the issue of the Houthis will definitely be resolved probably very soon. The stabilization of Syria is very important for everyone. It is important for the Saudis and Iraq. It's important for the Israelis, and it's important also for the Turks. So the stabilization of Syria is very important. So what I think in the next few months, the next few years, is you will probably see now the conversation and the engagement be more focused now on what we're going to do in Palestine. And this is the issue. You can do what you want to do with Hezbollah, with Iran, with Syria, with wherever, but you have to come back and resolve the issue internally. And the Egyptians and the Jordanians, they've been there for very long, and they have dealt with numerous administrations. From the days of Roosevelt until today, they have dealt with all these administrations very skillfully. They have dealt with these administrations through the Cold War, Soviet Union, Russian Federation, Russia. They've dealt with all of this. They are skilled. The Palestinians through Fatah, the PLO, Hamas, these entities, they are grounded within the grassroots. The issue is not going away. A very, very important outcome of this, of 7th of October, is the international community's response to this. Is this issue brought the Palestinian question and Palestinian cause back to the forefront of activism, up to countries where South Africa, and we saw the last few days what has happened, what South Africa is in terms of the court cases and so forth. It shows you that and countries like South Africa, important to remember, South Africa up till maybe 8 years ago, we positioned ourselves, especially in the days of Mbeki, as quote unquote mediators. But gradually, South Africa moved very clearly into the position of the activist and the pro-Palestinian movement, if that makes sense. Today, 149 countries recognize the state of Palestine. The demographics in Europe in 10 years' time will no longer support a pro-Israel position. All across Europe, there are mayors, there are senators, there are ministers who come from Middle East, third world, developing country backgrounds. And this, without a shadow of a doubt, in 10 years' time, in less than a generation, in my life and in your life, you will see that the politics of Europe will change because of the demographics. So Israel, again, you cannot exist with animosity amongst your Mid East neighbors. You have to coexist. And by the way, and final, the only conservative part of the world where you can exist is the Mid East. You cannot have a conservative Jewish a way of life and understanding and politics in the middle of Europe. That thing is rotten. The only place where people will understand you, understand your faith, understand your customs, and where Arabs have shown politically, in clear political terms, in security terms, the Egyptians, the Jordanians, and others who have welcomed peace. It's in the Middle East. Arabs are also Semite, So if Israel can stay in the Middle East, they are there, they're a state. Everyone recognizes them. We need justice. We need a two-state solution. The quicker the Israelis realize that, the easier it is for them. And it's important to note that in less than a generation, the politics of Europe, because of the demographics, will no longer support a foreign policy that blindly supports Israel as it is. And after 10, 15 years, then Israel's going to wake up and say, we don't have support anymore. The right-wing Republicans are riding their wave. In 4 years' time, you might have a swing. You might have, a very, very severe backlash back to leftist politics. And if leftist politics comes back into America, and in 10, 15 years, you have the demographic change that leads to policy change in Europe, where does this leave the Israelis? So the Israelis have to think very carefully, their leadership have to think very carefully of what their future looks like. This issue cannot be solved in a day or two. The Arabs are very clearly open to peace. They're open to this two-state solution. That is what is on the table there. The belligerent Netanyahu policies is not going to get them anywhere in the long term. That is what I believe the future holds.
Well, Mohammed Noor, I think what you're saying is very, very true and very interesting getting your analysis as always. And the tide is definitely turning. And we've said it from the outset. We've been saying it since this genocide has unfolded that Gaza has, and Palestinians in general, have the potential to determine what a new world order will look like. And like you speak about Europe and the demographics and the changes, all of this contributing or fast tracking towards these changes that we're seeing. And these are interesting times that we are living in. But as always, Mohammed Noor, great to have you with me. And once again, I appreciate your time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair.
Mohammed Nuruddin with us, political consultant, with us this evening against the backdrop of what we've been hearing all day, coming out of Washington, coming out of the White House, from Trump, from the likes of Benjamin Netanyahu. But again, there are bigger issues. There are other issues. To actually look at the picture is much bigger than just what we are actually thinking about. I will have a lot more of these type of discussions right here on Salam Media to unpack, to analyze, and to break down and to make sense of what is happening around us. But with that, I'm going to be signing off once again. An absolute pleasure being in your company. For myself and the team, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.